Okay, so I'm back again this morning. This is Sharonda, and this is Sharonda, I'm sorry, and this is my podcast as well as YouTube channel, Spiritual Sense. Today is August the 2nd, which is a Tuesday. And as I promised, I said I was going to be speaking on topics more in regards to the paranormal, occult, supernatural, pagan belief systems, and practices. And so when I did my episode on yesterday, a topic came up, and I said I was going to speak a little bit more in details in regards to familiar spirits. Okay. Uh, so give me just a moment. Let me make sure I am recording. Okay. Now I did do a presentation or a episode as well as a podcast episode some time ago when I mentioned about shape shifting and spiritual countenance versus spiritual countenance. Um, Familiar spirits operate by way of shape shifting and spiritual countenance. That is not crazy. And if you begin to take note of a lot of the movies and things that were being presented out, it was God enlightening you as such. And those who have some issues or who are afraid would denounce that and say that you are crazy. They will blame it on whatever the case may be, or mentally disturbed or mentally ill. But I do understand the logic and the reason behind it, because as I said before, when you don't want to accept things, you don't want to give those forces power, because when you begin to do that, it will take precedence in your life. So we will put it on mental illness. We will put it on medical illnesses and infirmities and concerns, or whatever the case may be, but it's more spiritual than you will know. Okay. So I pulled up some information here in regards to familiar spirits. So I'm on a website, is biblical verses on familiar spirits, and it has a number of verses here, and I will begin to read those verses out. Now, I want people to understand and know this is not a biblical podcast. Again, this is not a biblical podcast. And I also like to state that this podcast, as well as this YouTube channel, is for entertainment purposes. That means if it just so happens to coincide with your life, that may be by chance or even by happenstance. Again, it's not a biblical podcast. However, I will be prompted to go back to the biblical text. I am not a pastor. I am not a preacher. I'm not a prophetess, a deacon, elder, apostle, or any of that. I consider myself to be intuitive, a gypsy, if you may, a spiritualist, more or less. I don't associate myself with no particular religion, belief, or practice. Again, I would like to state that I do not associate myself with any religion, belief, or practice. That means I am unconventional than what you would know, because I don't want anybody feeling like I'm targeting them because of whatever belief they may be in, or what they or how they feel. There is a such thing as freedom of speech, long as it's done with tact. If it just so happened that you don't like what I'm saying or don't want to hear it, there's other podcasts that I do have. Holistic health being one of those, where I go over teas, tonic, herbs, chicken noodle soup type of recipes for your minor health concerns. That is holistic health. I go over chakra cleansing and clearing as well. I also have a talk radio podcast, which I will be formulating. I've been saying that for the last couple of months now. Um, holistic health. I'm sorry, talk radio, because I'm trying to, a thought just came in to speak in regards to the topic for today. So I don't want to confuse anybody. But anyways, that's talk radio is just a comprise of current events that I present in a podcast fashion. So if you go on there and you listen to it, a lot of the information is going to be outdated. I haven't recorded with my talk radio in probably close to 2 years now. I have Health Matters, subtitle Mental Health Matters, where I go over the pathophysiological concerns in regards to the body. Mental Health Matters, I present information in regards to mental and behavioral concerns that is in my Health Matters podcast and presentation. I have Ancient Ancestry, where I go over information in regards to focusing on the motherland, but different cultures, customs, and beliefs around the world. And then I have this one, which is Spiritual Sense. So I have a total of 5 podcasts. So we're going to look up familiar spirits. I don't want anybody feeling like I'm judging you, but I'm just saying, I'm just letting you know as it presents to me. I'm not judging anybody and what you do. You do you, long as it's not harmful to yourself or others. But you do have the right, if you know, in essence, if you want to cause harm to yourself, I mean, it could potentially cause harm to somebody else. So that's what I'm saying. But anyways, we're going to go into familiar spirits. Leviticus 19:31 says, regard not them that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. Isaiah 8:19, and when they shall say unto you, seek unto them that have familiar spirits, and unto wizards that peep and that mutter, should not a people seek unto their God, for the living to the dead. So it's so ironic that it mentioned about and the 2 wizards that peep, because it kept showing me like a peeping tom, what a peeping tom would be. In my mind's eye, a couple of days ago, it kept showing me that, and that is picking up on spirits from slaves, energies from a time ago. Isaiah 19:3, and the spirit of Egypt shall fall in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to the idols, and to the charmers, and to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards. Leviticus 26, and the soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits, and after wizards to go a whoring after them. I will even set my face against the soul, and will cut him off from among his people. So, in my interpretation that I just gathered from this, in other words, he will taunt you by way of these familiar spirits. So, in essence, it's a form of shielding not only yourself, but that person as well, particularly if you're not of a good spirit, and if that person is not of a good spirit. So that's basically what familiar spirits are. Acts 16 through 18. And it came to pass, as we went to prayer, a certain damsel possessed with a spirit of divination met us, which brought her masters much gain by soothsaying. So, in other words, I feel as though that is a like the damsel in distress, that is a setup, a hitchman, a test to bring you in. So you know, once the eyes has been opened, you will begin to understand what that is, how they will use one thing to bring about for something else. And that's essentially what that is. So in other words, enchantment, and I will get off into that as well. But before I'm jumping the gun. Give me just a moment because we're going to go back, is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to go back to the definition of familiar. Well known from long or close association. In close friendship, intimate. Okay, it has as that's as an adjective. As a noun, it says a demon supposedly intending on obeying a witch, often said to assume the form of an animal. A close friend or associate, a person rendering certain services in a pope's or bishop's household. So in other words, someone that a closer acquaintance, who would tell you who number one, who would have an issue with you knowing somebody and recognizing somebody that has something to hide, somebody who feels outnumbered, like somebody who feels like a whole bunch of people will come against me to do me harm or danger or put me out. So we're going to proceed back with the next few verses that I have here. And like I said, I'm not doing any preaching. I'm just basically giving my interpretation on what is here. Deuteronomy 18:10. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch. So in other words, this is somebody who don't supposed to think, is what that is. And anybody that thinks is a threat. Second Chronicles 33:6. And he caused his children to pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnon. Also, he observed times and used enchantments and used witchcraft and dealt with a familiar spirit. And with wizard, he wrought much evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. 2 Kings 23:24. Moreover, the workers with familiar spirits and the wizards and the images and the idols and all the abominations that were spied in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem did Josiah put away, that he might perform the words of the law which were written in the book that Hilkiah the priest found in the house of the Lord. Leviticus 20:27, a man also or a woman that hath a familiar spirit or that is a wizard shall surely be put to death. They shall stone them with stones, their blood shall be upon them. Revelation 21:8, but the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. So, in essence, in reading this information, you have to see the mindset. You have to understand the mindset of the individuals who are not only written this, but who comprise the book. This is through their eyes and their thoughts and feelings. This here lets me know that this is a jealous person. This is a jealous person who does not want you to recognize his own demons, who does not want you to have a discerning spirit. You just do. That's what that is. So in other words, this lets me know that this is something that is over somebody that is doing heavy labor and heavy works. That's what that lets me know. Like this is someone who's privileged or who is kept. That's what that lets me know. Galatians 5:20, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, immolations, wrath, strife, seditions, and heresies. 1 Samuel 28:3-25. Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had lamented him and buried him in Ramah, even in his own city. And Saul had put away those that had familiar spirits and the wizards of the land. 2 Kings 21:6. And he made his son pass through the fire and observed times and used enchantments and dealt with familiar spirits and wizards. He wrought much wickedness in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. Revelations 22:15. For without are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and idolaters and whomever or whosoever loveth and maketh a lie. So basically with this here is don't lie to people because they want to know if the things that presents to me, is it real? This is a test, and this is how conviction comes about. This is how they're able to know the context or the mindset of the individuals that is above the situation, how they feel about things. So don't lie to them because it throws them off, it confuses them. Deuteronomy 18:14, for these nations which thou shalt possess, hearken unto observers of times and unto diviners. But as for thee, the Lord thy God hath not suffered thee so to do. Daniel 2:27, Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers, and show unto the king. 1 Chronicles 10:13, so Saul died for his transgressions, which he committed against the Lord, even against the word of the Lord, which he kept not, and also for asking counsel of one that had a familiar spirit to inquire of it. That means this is somebody who is jealous. You do what I say do and nothing to the contrary. Essentially is what that mentions to me. Acts 16:16. And it came to pass as we went to prayer, a certain damsel possessed with the spirit of divination met us, which brought her masters much gain by soothsaying. In other words, a damsel, as I mentioned, a damsel in distress. So you got to be very careful because they will use pawns to deceive you. Deuteronomy 18:11. And that what I mean by pawns, like we will be used as kind of like a game of chess. It's what it mentioned, is what it's showing in my mind's eye, kind of like a game of chess, as if you are being used as a pawn. These spirits manifest in our time and our space, and you will operate out of its desire, is what that is. So Deuteronomy 18:11, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. Now I looked that word up on yesterday because I knew I was going to I was going to present and go into topic into details in regards to today. Well, that is a practitioner of magic work. Nahum 3:4. I never heard of that in the Bible. Nahum. Let's put that in and see if I can get the actual pronunciation of that. Just a moment. I've never seen that, but of course I'm not a biblical person. Nahum. Okay, so Nahum. Give me just a moment. Nahum 3:4, because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favored harlot, the mistress of witchcraft that selleth nations through her whoredoms and families through her witchcrafts. So in other words, there are nations that has a prevalence in being or operating as a damsel in distress is basically what I gather from that. And you have to be aware and conscientious of these particular regions because this is their craft. This is how they thrive. This is how they survive. 2 Kings 9:22, and it came to pass when Joram saw Jehu, and Jehu, I can't pronounce a lot of these words, so I'm just going to go off the best way I can, that he said, "It is peace, Jehu," and he answered, "What peace, so long as the whoredoms of thy mother Jezebel and her witchcrafts are so many." So, in other words, it says that for discernment, we are aware of the ones that try to get rid of you because the mama taught them how to be manipulative. What is the mama? Well, a Jezebel spirit. A Jezebel spirit represent and we put it out on forefront so people can recognize and understand that spirit. And that's essentially why you don't put so much credence in certain people because they are operating or they're acting in such a manner to bring awareness as to what the enchantment of those type of spirits and those type of people. Jeremiah 1:1-19, the words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, of the priests that were in Anathoth in the land of Benjamin. It has more to read there, but I'm not going to go into too much of this. It's a couple more that I'm going to go and then I'm going to give my account. Acts 8:9, but there was a certain man called Simon, which before time in the same city used sorcery and bewitched the people of Samaria, giving out that himself was some great one. So in other words, he came about and was presenting the things that in other words, made them thirsty for something that they was not familiar with, that they wasn't used to make itself appear to be godlike or above all, is what I gather from that. Deuteronomy 18:9-14, when thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. In other words, don't follow up behind in and everything that looks good to you, because you don't know out of what desire is forefronted, meaning out of what demon is behind that is what that is. Revelations 18:23, and the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. So in other words, in essence, they use they are being forefronted to put out a image to expose a certain group of individuals is what that is. That's what it means when it mentions that they sell out or they're being as a celebrity, like I'm being paid to expose and essentially to bring awareness as such. I have sold out, so I'm at, when they begin to catch on, I could possibly be at harm's way. In a sense, like a whistleblower. A whistleblower is somebody that brings in awareness, investigative reporter of the things or the conditions or the disparities that are prevalent, despite what they like to project. The realistic or the realism of the situation is basically what I gather from this. Now, Deuteronomy 18:10 through 12, there shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch. So, in other words, we don't want you come around here. We already know this. We don't want you come around here putting on no show. We already know this. This is what it is. This is what it's going to be. Da 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 da. Acts 19:19. Many of them also which used curious arts brought their books together and burned them before all men. And they counted the price of them and found it 50,000 pieces of silver. So, in other words, they want your knowledge. They'll sit here and descant your capabilities to make you give it up. But in essence, the whole while, they're operating out of the spirit. It doesn't truly know because it doesn't think. A spirit doesn't think, it does as it's told to do. Plain and simple. It doesn't think, there's no thinking behind it. It just operates. Romans 1 through 32. Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to an apostle, separated into the gospel of God. And let me read more of this. It goes very, very extensive, so I'm not going to read more of that. We're going to conclude with the last one. It says 1 Chronicles 10:13 through 14. So Saul died for his transgressions which he committed against the Lord, even against the word of the Lord, which he kept not, and also for asking counsel of one that had a familiar spirit to inquire of it. So, in other words, curious. He wants you to keep his word to him and don't say nothing to them because he's a jealous. Okay. Enchantment. We're going to look up the definition of enchantment. Enchantment. First off, this is how you know those who have received and those who have not. Because even if you try to keep people from knowing, God is going to put the spirit in them to know as well. Anyways, a feeling of great pleasure, delight, enchantment of the mountains, but it also represents magic, witchcraft, sorcery, wizardry, necromancy, conjuration. It's the state of being under a spell. So that's my closest fitted to enchantment. Oftentimes they don't want you to they don't like familiar spirits because familiar spirits I'm not going to sit here and say all the time, but sometimes there is enchantment with um familiar spirits. That means uh they see you as somebody that can take them under their wing and take them away from them. Is what that is. In the sense of a cunning. Like, they may think that you may try to take them under the wing to do them under and to brainwash them. Is what that is. So familiar spirits happen by way of not all the time, but some of the times you may be able to notice spiritual countenance or shape shifting. It's an enchantment. Many people may say that you're crazy. They refer to you as to being mentally ill, but that's essentially what that is. The eyes has been engaged and open. You're not crazy. You're able to pick up on different spirits that are around. Is what's going on. It will put it on mental illness, but those who know will know what that is. Once the eyes have been opened, you will know, because oftentimes things, and I feel I'm being pulled right now. I'm being pulled right now. If you're not there in certain circumstances, because sometimes you don't necessarily have to be in the room for God to give you discernment about whatever the case may be. But for certain individuals who have not received that spiritual awakening, oftentimes they will have to be there to gain insight, but you will truly understand and know what that is when a person is empath and they're able to pick up on auditorial what is being said somewhere else. It don't take a demon. I mean, it doesn't take a scientist to know what that is. And I think in essence, I'm being pulled right now. I'm here, but I'm being pulled. In essence, I think that is what is going on with one of the candidates in politics right now. Like, I feel as though you're picking up on auditorially, you're tapping into the feelings and the hearts of someone, possibly within the room or within the vicinity, but they're not going to let you know. And because they feel as though you're putting my deepest desires or my deepest feelings out on Front Street, they're going to say that you're crazy. Okay? So I am going to conclude this YouTube presentation as well as this podcast on my spiritual sense, speaking about familiar spirits. What are familiar spirits? Familiar spirits oftentimes can be, I'm not going to say all of them, can be enchanting spirits. So this is how a jealous person would see it, particularly when they feel like they're being outnumbered or someone can come against it. This is what a lot of the desires are when you're dealing with something in regards to a particular place and time. So that's basically what that is. It's the author's depiction of a period of time and how things work. Okay? So I thank you for tuning in and also listening in to this podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you're more than welcome to comment below. Until then, you have a safe and wonderful day. Good day.